If you remember, we did this experiment before in our stations. We had people exercise and we were checking out what happened when they're breathing in bags and everything, that paper bag. But when you exercise, your rate of metabolism goes up, so you definitely, you need more oxygen and you have a buildup of carbon dioxide and then lactate in your blood. And a combination of that makes your pH go down. So say if it was a 6.5, it might go to 6.1. And you have these receptors in your carotid artery. And your aorta. So right around your heart you have these, and also remember up in your brainstem, in your medulla. Trying to work on that handwriting. And that's going to increase your breathing rate because you want to get rid of that carbon dioxide. So those impulses sent to that big muscle that helps control your breathing rate, and I love the intercostal muscles are your rib muscles, your ribs. Right in between the ribs, and if you've eaten ribs, you've eaten those intercostal muscles. But that'll change your breathing rate. Okay, so you breathe faster, and it is a reflex. And if it's a reflex, it's involuntary. So involuntary, you can't control it, but if you breathe more, you'll get rid of those CO2, and that's going to raise your blood pH. And the long-term effects, if you keep exercising a lot, you'll have improved or greater vital capacity. Greater vital capacity, so your lung volume will increase. So if you get on a treadmill and you keep running faster and faster, you'll see you're going to be breathing faster too. So your ventilation rate is going to go up. Just make sure you can ventilation. On the test they might throw something like that out to you. And that's always in breaths per minute. We have those nice respiration belts we can record that automatically. And here you'll see liters. It rests, and then when you're breathing really hard, you're going to be breathing in a lot more volume of air into your lungs. So that last one is your tidal volume of this box right here. Tidal volume in liters. So as a fetus, it's a little bit different. They have a slightly higher stickiness to oxygen than adults. So right here, this is fetal hemoglobin. And this is adult hemoglobin. There we go. This is adult. So this is important because in order for the fetus to gain oxygen, it needs to be able to pull it away from the mother's blood supply. So basically it's stickier, it's more attractive, more magnetic. It's going to pull off that oxygen and remove it so it can get oxygen. If you didn't have this shift right here, it'd be much harder for the fetus to get the oxygen it needs. Just another way that the fetus sucks everything out of the mother fetus is just, it takes takes the mother's bones, it takes its oxygen, everything. So this is I'm always been interested in athletic stuff, and I've always heard that you go train at altitude, like my cycling stuff. Pro cyclists will train at altitude. It's supposed to help them in their competitions. But here, in this diagram, this would be what the high altitude is like. And down here would be sea level. And there's always about 21% oxygen in the air. But the issue is it's much less dense. It's still 21%, but it's 2 oxygens out of 8. Down here, it's still 21%, but you get 7 oxygen. Focus on that 2 and that 7. So up here, high altitude, you're breathing not a whole lot of oxygens in, and it's for some people it varies by people, and it doesn't even have to do with how in shape you are. It's kind of a genetic thing, how you respond to different altitude. However, if you do acclimate yourself, if you do go and train or just go and live in high altitude, your body starts adjusting. Your tidal volume is going to increase. Your ability to process oxygen will get a little bit better. And therefore, when a person goes from high altitude trains down to low altitude, they should usually see some increased performance because they've become more efficient at processing oxygen. And what you see here, this is a special tent, hyperbaric chamber, where this guy is just living, hanging out in his little tent. And I think you can see down here, but there's a motor pulling out the air, reducing the concentration of oxygen in that tent, so he gets a training effect. So these are different things people do to try to increase their athletic performance. So between 7.35 and 7.45. So if you get too acidic, you're going to hyperventilate. And that will remove CO2, going to raise that pH. Okay, the CO2 makes carbonic acid, H2CO3, and that can be detrimental. So your body is always trying to keep that balanced. Also, your kidneys can secrete hydrogen ions to raise pH, so that your kidneys can get involved too, not just your lung. But then if it goes too high, if it starts going 7.5 or above, you can breathe into a bag like we did. You breathe in your own CO2 to lower pH back down. So you're trying to increase your CO2 level that's going into your blood to try to lower it back down into your normal range. So emphysema, you may have heard of this before. People that are carrying oxygen tanks around are suffering from it, but the alveoli in your lungs are breaking down. They become bigger, so instead of all these little pockets of air, you got one big one, and that really reduces your surface area. Yeah. And it can become trapped in certain areas of the lungs, and it's not going in and out, it's not getting more oxygen, it's not getting released, it's not releasing that CO2, and that's going to be detrimental to you breathing. And the main cause is this irritation, having those alveoli get irritated. Things like tobacco smoke, and then coal, so coal miners, and then silica dust, which coal miners would be exposed to as well, but also people working in different industries. Any kind of dust is bad. Any kind of smoke is bad. You just don't want to be around that stuff. And 3 factors talk about the irritation. create oxidation, inflammation, and these things called free radicals that can cause damage to cells. And very rarely, some people get a mutation in their DNA, and that creates a problem with making certain enzymes. Okay, this enzyme called alpha A antitrypsin, and that will create emphysema in a person that hasn't been exposed to dust or tobacco smoke or anything. Cannot be cured, well, if you get a lung transplant, but those are very rare and difficult. They can be alleviated though. People can breathe extra oxygen using an oxygen tank, and there's also different respiratory therapies where they teach them how to breathe differently, and that can help them. So this is similar to what we saw in the fetal chart. The fetal, how the fetus can grab that oxygen from the mother. So if you, on the exam, they might give you a diagram where you have to identify these different cells. So pneumocyte, basically the cells of the alveoli are classified two different ones. Type 1, it's thin, it's basically the cell that makes most of the alveoli. There's also a pneumocyte type 2. And you can just see how it's spelled there too. And they're much bigger, and there's not as many of them. So pneumocyte type 1, lots of these. We'll say lots, and these over here, there's fewer. And the thing about the pneumocyte, it makes a surfactant. This came up in some other topic. I think it's back to topic 6. Surfactant, it's like a soap. Helps to keep the alveoli from sticking together, so it prevents sticking. Prevents sticking. You can't really see that, so I'll put it here. So the alveoli stays inflated, person can breathe. Premature babies, this is one of the main problems. Their pneumocyte type 2 aren't working, and the lungs just aren't as efficient getting the oxygen they need. Over here, down here, you can see a red blood cell. Characteristic shape, and then this structure here, filled with red blood cells, you guessed it, is a capillary. And I think I had some more. So this is a capillary schematic diagram. Pulmonary capillary, and this is actually right here an endothelial cell. We'll get to in a second, and this is the alveolus. And here it talks about that pulmonary surfactant, the type 2. Alveolar cells are all these, and we have a surfactant, and then a little bit of macrophage there that comes out of the blood supply, and that helps to fight off diseases. Ooh, and a giant, look at that giant, well, not giant, it's just, you see, that's how big the red blood cell looks because these capillaries are so teeny tiny. And this is the capillary endothelium here. It's just a cell growing, just showing that inner lining. Capillary endothelium. Ooh. And with that, you have finished option D. And so have I.